Hello and welcome along to another EFL Manager Special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm back with Craig and Charlie as always, and half an hour ago we were settling down for a calm afternoon, and in Port Vale have produced some fireworks. They have appointed Daryl Clark from divisional rivals Walsall on a 3.5-year deal. We'll get to all of that in a minute as always, lads. But firstly, we want to talk about the outgoing man, and in this instance we've got an interim man to talk about as well. So let's start with John Askey, as we always do in these manager specials. Of course, he ended his reign with 6 games without a win. He's spoken himself after Boxing Day, a defeat at Barrow, said the wheels have fallen off the promotion campaign, and eventually they were down in 17th place. So coming to you first, Craig, I think as much as we didn't want to see it, given your pre-season optimism, I think it's fair to say that John Askey maybe not too harsh a sacking.
No, because I tipped them for the playoffs and it's not gone well. And like, to be fair, I expected a lot better. They had a pretty good end of last season before it all stopped. And I thought they might sneak the playoffs again, and it's just all gone wrong. Tom Pope, one of the best players in the team, obviously hasn't scored. I think he's only scored 3 goals all season in the league, so that's not ideal. Yeah, it's just not gone well.
And Charlie, to be fair, Craig has mentioned it. Although it didn't end well for John Askey, towards the end of last season, he did really well there, and they did have some good times. So I guess, albeit it ended in disappointment, would it be fair to say overall he did make a positive contribution to the club?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing is as well, you've got to look at the bigger picture. I suppose, obviously, recent form hasn't been great, and they are 18th despite Craig's prediction. But, he's got nearly a 40% win percentage. Quite often the youth players end up going to some of the bigger clubs in the area. So it's always hard to operate in those sort of circumstances. And I think to keep them up and around where they were, and he had some big names there, like you say, Tom Pope, and big characters, and has grown the profile of the club a little bit. So I think taking it off the pitch a little bit, obviously the results recently haven't quite gone the way they should have done, but I don't know. I can see why it's obviously happened, but I don't think he did the worst job.
Absolutely. And we'll move on to the interim period, Craig, because of course for the last 6 games, or 6 league games, 7 games in all competitions, Danny Pugh has been in charge, and they picked up 7 points, of course a couple of wins, a draw and 3 defeats. So he kept things ticking over, but we mentioned this in the Fleetwood one recently. Is perhaps the fact it's taken so long to appoint a manager, we'll get onto the reasons why it's happened now, is that potentially going to harm any potential they had of reaching the playoffs? Because they're now at a stage where 6 games later, they're still 10 points off the playoffs.
To be honest, I think this season's a really weird one of like any momentum for any team, to be fair. Obviously, we said that for every league now, that anyone that gets a winning run could easily sneak back into the playoffs. And you look at Tranmere, for example, they sacked their manager very early on. Look where they are now in the league. It just generally depends on the run. And obviously, Danny Pugh took over temporary, off to a great start with that 3-0 win against Grimsby. But it still feels a bit of the same. I think it just needs someone new, just some different ideas. And surprisingly, it's someone that, to be fair, this manager has obviously played them twice already and won both times.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Let's come back to Charlie, because I don't want to get straight onto Daryl Clark, because there's a little bit of symmetry in the middle that we've got to talk about here. Because towards the end of last week, David Flitcroft suddenly popped up at Port Vale as director of football. Now, there was a lot of talk at the time that he'd initially been in talks for the managerial vacancy, and there was a cloud of uncertainty around it, I think we'll say. But less than a week later, he's potentially brought in what, I'll get my opinion out of the way early, is a very good managerial appointment. So the David Flitcroft situation seems to have worked for them.
Yeah, I thought we were going to get another Jonathan Woodgate sort of situation, but, actually I think this is quite an astute appointment. I think it shows the direction the club's going in the sense of, the fact that David Flitcroft hasn't tried to put himself forward, obviously, but also, like I say, a well thought out appointment. And I think recruitment is so important at this level, and I think they've nailed it a bit there.
Yeah, completely agree. And coming over to you, Craig, obviously the new manager is Daryl Clark. Now, one of the things I mentioned at the start that was a bit of a surprise to me when I first saw it was 3.5-year deal, which go completely the opposite to what we've seen at a lot of the League One and League Two appointments that have been end of the season or 1-year extensions. So there's certainly a lot of belief in this vision under Daryl Clark. He's not going to be a cheap one for compensation if they want to break it, unless there's a break clause that we don't know about. But give me your initial reaction to the appointment. Do you think stealing him from divisional rivals Walsall is a good appointment?
He's a good coach, to be fair, and obviously they must have spent quite a lot of money for him, obviously for compensation to Walsall, let alone try and figure out his compensation if he does get a sack later down the line. But let's not think about that yet. He's done an excellent job with Bristol Rovers. He's got the 2 promotions in 2 seasons from National League to League One. He's a very solid coach, and I think it's a good signing to have. obviously David Flitcroft as a director, obviously probably might have some saying to that. Yeah, it's a strange one how Walsall would let their manager go to a divisional rival. And might not have had the best of January, sending their top goal scorer to Luton Town. Yeah, it's a good signing for Port Vale's sake.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think the same on the Walsall fact. They've already hinted towards the financial side. It was said with Adebayo going to Luton in January that they had to let one or two go to balance the books. And I guess Daryl Clark, even as manager, he's not exempt from that. But Charlie, Craig's mentioned the fact that 2 promotions back-to-back at Bristol Rovers, also got double promotion at Salisbury, albeit at a lower level. But he's a manager that's got lots of promotions on his CV, a good body of work on his CV, and has also got promotion out of this division. It surely is a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, like you say, with Salisbury as well, I think he took from the Southern Premier all the way up to the Conference, in that sense. So I think, you talk about someone who can work in different environments. It's not like, it's a well-rounded manager. He's worked obviously with Bristol Rovers and done what he's done there, but he's been at the other end of the spectrum as well. And I think in tighter conditions where we are now, in terms of financials, which you mentioned, probably with Walsall even, and the pandemic, you need people who can operate well in those conditions. You don't want someone who's going to go splashing around cash left, right, and centre sort of quite aimlessly. So I think in that sense alone, he was worth the appointment. His win ratio speaks for himself in terms of what he's already achieved as a manager. But yeah, so in that sense, I think it was a no-brainer. The only thing is in this current climate, 3.5-year contracts is a bit of a rarity for managers at the minute. But then if you want to get your man, and that's sort of what he's after, he needs that security as well. So I think it's a win-win for both clubs at the minute.
Yeah, and the biggest thing they've mentioned in their statement, Port Vale, is the fact that he's got that massive win percentage of nearly 45%. The fact that he's got a proven track record of developing young players, which is something they seem to be really keen on. But Craig, before we get to our final questions about the rest of the season and Daryl Clark's success in the future, we've got to talk about the Port Vale squad. Obviously, he's coming after the transfer window, so he's not going to be able to do work there. But they've got some good experience in that team. I know we mentioned Tom Pope earlier, but Mark Cullen's up there as well, a goal scorer at this level. Leon Legg, the skipper at the back, bundles of experience. The same for Scott Brown, the keeper. There's plenty of others in there as well. I'm just picking out a few. Potentially, he's got, if he can get them playing, quite a good, experienced, hard-working professional squad to work with.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with this squad, to be fair. You've named a few there. Obviously, Devante Rodney's top goal scorer at the moment with 10. There's some good players in this side. I don't know what's gone wrong with just how they've gone so low. I think I think ran out of ideas. I just think it just needed something fresh and something different for this squad. And that's not a blame on John Askey at all. I think, as Charlie said earlier, I've got to give him some credit for it. He has to work with this squad now. Obviously, the transfer window is over. Stability, that's what I would expect.
And the thing is, regardless of what happens the rest of this season, Charlie, you presume he's going to, get longer and the start of next season to start to prove his worth, given the length of the contract. But I guess you're going to get to answer the fun question, which is they're 9 points off the relegation zone. They're 10 points off the playoffs. They've played more games than virtually every team around them. Where are they going to end up this season? Are they going to be able to push a late run, or is it a little bit too little too late, unfortunately?
It's tough. You mentioned about, obviously, the work that he's got to do with the squad that he's got. They are one of the higher goal scorers in the league. 40 goals this season. But the problem is they've let him 43. And I think we say this a lot about having to address the issues at the back. It depends how much work he can do with that. You do look at, not just saying, we mentioned about Tom Pope, but Christian Montano and people like that as well. They've got some good players there. But I just think if he can shore up that back line, I don't see why they can't. But, we talk about League Two at the minute being all over the shop. We mentioned about Bradford before, etc. I really don't know. Cambridge are top, but they haven't looked convincing. They got beat 4-1 the other day. So this is probably, of all the leagues to predict it at this point, it's probably the toughest. Do I think they'll do it? I don't think they will do this year. However, next year, I know Craig maybe jumped the gun a year early on Port Vale getting in the playoffs. I think next year, all being well that, there's not complete implosion, I can't see why they wouldn't be up there next year. I think this year there's just too much to do, and I think probably too much defensively to address. To be letting him 43 goals is a bit of a worry this stage in the season already.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the highest conceded in the league. And Craig, coming back to you with the same question, your hopes for the rest of the season. Of course, the first 3 games couldn't be more different for Daryl Clark. He's got mid-table Orient, near the bottom fight in Stevenage, and top of the table Cambridge. So it's going to be an interesting start for him. Yeah,
all 3 tough games for the rest of this month. All different types of teams as well. Not obviously even in position, but how they play football, to be fair. So it's a good test for Daryl Clark. It's a very good test. How do I see them go? Yeah, I know I tipped them for 7th in the predictions to start the season. That's not going to happen now. I'd be amazed if they get the playoffs now, because it's just, to be fair, looking at the table now, it's far too tight at the top, to be fair. From 9th place onwards to Cambridge and top, it could be anyone's game, to be fair. But yeah, I said stability. I said was spot on, really. conceded far too many goals. They need to start from the back, start keeping clean sheets. They can score goals, so that's not really a problem in that area. It's just keeping them out. But yeah, I think they'll be fine. Not expecting top half of the table. I'd say about 14th.
Yeah, fair enough. I completely agree with you. Roughly top of the bottom half. I think you'll be spot on there. And then the final question, it's a one-word answer for the both of you. Charlie Betts, is Daryl Clark the right appointment for Port Vale?
Absolutely.
Craig Savage, same question to you, please.
Yes.
We are all in agreement, and that normally does not mean good news for the fans of those clubs. So we apologise in advance to
Look
the
at
Port
Paul
Vale
Tisdale.
fans.
Look at Paul Tisdale.
I'm not having that now, Joe.
We said he needed time. Apologies to Port Vale fans in advance. Of course, we're thinking a bit of patience this year and probably the big run next season after a good summer. But if you did enjoy this episode, of course, please do put a thumbs up on it. If you're a Port Vale fan, let us know down in the comments what you think of the appointment. And if you're a Walsall fan, I'd love to know your thoughts, because that's got to be a bizarre one that you weren't expecting today. There weren't even many reports of it beforehand. If you haven't already, please do subscribe down below and turn that notification bell on. You'll get alerts as regular content comes out from the podcast. Championship predictions back later in the week. Thank you to Craig and Charlie for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3, and we'll see you next time.